Hey designers, welcome back to the studio. Let's come back to our value drawings, our value scale drawings. The first sort of attempt at this, we made use of our felt tip pens and our rollerball pens. This is a really committed way of building value. There's really no way to erase, there's really no way to blend. The first technique was to lay in lines that are sort of set up as a lattice, and the wider the lattice, the lighter it feels, and the tighter the lattice, the darker it feels. That's cross-hatching, and then we did this kind of patience test, right, of just laying one point next to the next, next to the next, and it's a really nice, smooth, gentle, kind of naturalistic way of laying this, a sort of stippling or pointillist techniques of either small dots or even small scribbles. Let's lay in a couple more today. For that, we're going to need our pencils and our charcoal. Let's use our graphite pencils first. Now, our graphite pencils, if you take a real close look at the ends, are sort of set up into three different grades. Now, 3 pencils, 3 different grades is a pretty small pencil kit. Let me just kind of lay it out for you in that if you have your HB pencil, sort of imagine that's about right in the center in terms of its softness, or what we might call darknesses. And if your 6H pencil is over here on the hard end of the spectrum, and your 4B pencil is over here on the soft end of the spectrum, you can kind of imagine that there are a couple pieces missing. So you could go all the way up to about a 10H pencil in terms of hardness and lightness of the line, and equally down toward like the kind of 5B, 6B, 7B, 8B, really soft, dark pencils down at the other end. Now your charcoal will actually end up kind of living far on the soft end of that spectrum, and there are some other sort of types of drawing materials that could potentially sit in there. But in terms of what you guys have access to, your 4B pencil will be on the dark end, or the top of your scale here. Your HB pencil may kind of live somewhere in the middle, and your 6H may lightly fill in down at the bottom. Let's use the side of our pencils to build as uniform of a field of that kind of nice soft gray tone as we can. For that, we're going to have to expose a little bit more lead, a little bit more graphite on the ends here. I'm going to recommend against using a pencil sharpener to expose more of your lead. And I'm actually going to say take out your X-Acto blade, and you could do this over a trash can, or I'll just do it over a scrap piece of paper. Especially for my 4B pencil, I'm just going to carefully whittle off some of the wood that makes up the sheath of this drawing tool and expose more of that graphite. A good reason to do this kind of sharpening is as you start to spend up and kind of increase the quality of your drawing materials, well, you don't just want to stick it in a pencil sharpener and grind away all that really expensive drawing medium. You want to hang on to as much of that as you can, or I should say you want to, put it into your artwork, not the trash. So by sharpening the wood, I was able to basically waste hardly any graphite, and I still have all of that drawing material ready to go. I can also use my knife to actually shape the graphite into a drawing shape that I would prefer. On this first really dark square, I'm going to come in and lay down sort of a mid-tone of that graphite and lay it down in successive layers. The first layer I put down is sort of a light layer, and I'm not pushing really hard. I don't want to polish the paper. My next layer is going to come in at a little bit of an angle and slowly kind of fill in a lot of those gaps or points where my initial kind of graphite line wasn't complete enough. In this way, I'll slowly build value through the page using layers. Try to fill your square edge to edge, corner to corner. Okay, so before I try to darken that square anymore, I'm going to kind of continue down the row here, and I'll use my 4B pencil for at least one more square. And notice I'm trying to kind of keep this as uniform as possible. I don't want there to be a dark edge and a light edge. I'm trying to lay down my layers so that they all fill that square edge to edge and corner to corner. At this point, I think I'll switch over to my HB pencil as I'm starting to get lighter and lighter. My HB pencil is not only lighter, but it's harder, and so my line work actually has a little bit harder edge to it, and if I'm not careful, it'll be a little bit more difficult to blend. So be patient as you're building your values here. Don't let the pencil move too quickly over the page and include too many white spaces in between your lines. Those white spaces will be very difficult to blend out later on. I'm going to use a much lighter pressure now as I start to lay in my second to last lightest block. And in this block, I'm being very careful to keep my lines tight. And I'll just sort of fill in some of these edges. And for my last box, I'll switch to my 6H pencil. Now this pencil has a very hard, sharp point, and if I'm not careful, will show a lot of line work. So I'm going to draw very, very lightly in this box. So now I have some adjusting to do. This definitely feels like the lightest box. This is a little bit darker. Then this box starts to feel almost a little bit darker than this one. So I think I'm going to focus on my top two boxes and bring these both down. Starting with the 4B. And increasing the pressure now so that I'm laying down more graphite. Some easy mistakes to make with graphite as you're laying these colors down, or as you're laying these values down, is that because graphite is a very slippery material, and if you add too much pressure, too much graphite too fast, you'll actually polish the paper, and it'll be really difficult to add any successive layers of graphite to it. What oftentimes makes these different values really stand out from each other is not so much that I've got a darker pencil necessarily. I probably could have used the 4B pencil throughout this whole row. It's that I've laid down more of that graphite, or I've got layers on top of layers on top of layers. The only way to do that is by not polishing it and by building those layers slowly. Let's use our template one more time, and we'll do a second row of value today. And in this second row, we'll make use of our charcoal. Now, charcoal, I had you put it in these plastic tubes because it is really fragile. If you get one of the sticks out and take a close look at it, it's not the same kind of drawing material as your graphite pencils, even though they may kind of yield a similar result. The charcoal pencils or charcoal sticks are exactly what they sound like. They are charcoalized pieces of willow branch. If you look carefully at the end, you can even see where sort of the heartwood and then the kind of sapwood is around the outside, and you'll even see little knots along the way. They're a very natural material. When you feel them in your hand, they don't feel manufactured. They're also very brittle, and so you'll snap them or they'll crumble if you push too hard on the point. Let's slowly build up our layers here with the charcoal. And if you're laying this down for the first time, you notice, wow, that gets down really dark, really fast. So what I'll encourage you to do is lay down sort of some light patches here as we go. I'll kind of gradually step up here. Now, I laid down almost no pressure at all as I got down to my bottom layer here. You might be tempted at this point to sort of lay a finger down and smudge that, and honestly, as I'm drawing, you might even see me just sort of use my thumb casually to polish, but as a general habit, I would say that's not a great habit to get into. Your hands are usually covered in oils and other dirt, and if you start to rub that into the page, you fix or polish the paper so that it won't accept any more drawing medium. If you really want to use an instrument to sort of blend in here, I'd actually recommend that you make your own. To do that, just use a scrap piece of paper, and you just need a small scrap of it, something square shaped, and your sketchbook paper will work really good for this. If you start at one of the corners and start by rolling up a very, very, very tight corner, what you'll end up with is a paper stick, and hopefully you have a bit of tape handy somewhere close by. A piece of masking tape will work just fine. I'm going to put a piece of tape right around the middle. Now with the X-Acto blade, just sort of find where the paper still has some thickness in there and slice that off. I'm going to sort of sharpen mine just a little bit. And then you can sort of rough that down on the on maybe the surface of another piece of paper, or if you happen to have some sandpaper or a bit of fabric around, just something to sort of rough up the end of that paper. Now, honestly, they do sell paper blending stumps, and they use a bit of a softer paper, but honestly, for our purposes, a bit of sketchbook paper that's kind of got it roughed up on the edge, that'll work just fine. Now, just like the drawing medium, if you're going to use a blending stump, you'll want to blend very, very gently, very, very softly. One of the things you'll notice immediately with charcoal is that as you blend it, it lightens up immediately. What we'll end up doing is sort of spreading around that charcoal onto the page, and it spreads out very quickly and almost disappears into this paper. In this case, because charcoal is so soft and sort of fades so quickly, I'm starting on the light end and working towards the dark end. I'm working very lightly with the pressure on the blending stump. When you're done with the charcoal stick, do yourself a favor and make sure you get it back in its tube, or if you broke it into a few pieces, put all the pieces back in there. We'll be able to make more use of that later on. You may also find that you need to wash your hands afterwards because it gets pretty messy. If you like your blending stump, go ahead and save that. We may have use for that later too. One of the things you'll notice though about these drawings is that they may shed a lot of charcoal. The charcoal kind of material doesn't stick to the page anything like the way pen or even graphite does. It sort of floats on the surface of the page. That's okay. What I want you to start to pay attention to now that we have 4 of these drawn is just the sort of different personalities of the toning and what sort of control you have and how much time you've invested to get there and which one of these feels the best to you. I'll catch up with you guys in the studio.